George Soros is here. He is one of the most successful hedge fund managers ever. His famed quantum fund has made him a billionaire many times over. He is also one of the most generous philanthropists anywhere. He has devoted much of his fortune to a range of global causes, including the support of democratic reform and open societies. It has been said that he is the only private citizen in the world with his own foreign policy. Since 9/11, he has turned his attention to America and how America relates to the rest of the world. He has become a lightning rod for Republicans. In the 2004 presidential election, he contributed $27.5 million to groups dedicated to defeating the president. In his new book, The Age of Fallibility, Consequences of the War on Terror, he talks about his concerns for America. I'm pleased to have him back at this table. Welcome.
Pleasure to be here.
Tell me where you think we are, and I just want to hear out where America is, this country that's been very good to you.
Very much so.
You know, and that you love.
Yes.
What are you worried about, and where do you think we are, and where do you think we need to go?
Well, I think we lost our way after September 11 with the war on terror. And the consequences of our waging that war has been disastrous because it's a counterproductive policy. And I think the public now recognizes that going into Iraq was a mistake of one kind or another. But people still believe in this concept of the war on terror. It's a metaphor, and it's a false metaphor. But it's a natural one because we've been attacked, so we have to hit back. So what's more natural than call it the war on terror?
Yeah, but just make one point. You were in favor of hitting back at bin Laden and al-Qaeda in Afghanistan.
Absolutely. They are the ones who hit us. But in waging war on terror, we are hitting others than the ones who hit us. It's because, we went to attack Iraq. And waging war, in any case, it creates innocent victims, and that's what generates resentment and rage against us. So we have created a vicious circle of escalating violence, and what was a figure of speech to start with has become a real war, which we are now waging on a number of fronts. And it's a war that we actually are losing.
Okay. Is it the defining struggle of our time, this conflict between the United States and values that it represents, and the West, let's say, and radical fundamentalists who are terrorists?
No, this is our choice. We are creating that. Going into Iraq was a war of choice. And having this clash of civilizations is also our choice. Because when we were attacked, we were basically the dominant power in the world. No external power or combination of powers could endanger our position. No terrorist attack could really do that. It could hurt us, but not really endanger us. And it's our response, our response to it, you see, that has, we set the agenda for the world at that time.
Okay. I want to hear out what you say, because, I mean, you've laid this out in not only here, but in other places, too. There was recently, in London, as you know, the arrest of some people who wanted to blow up some planes coming to America.
Right.
You know, did not have anything to do with the Iraqi war.
Right.
Did have something to do, it looks like, with a terrorist organization.
Right.
So what is it? And there are others. There were incidents in the Philippines where they had the same intent.
Yes.
What ought to be the response to people who want to come over here and kill us?
Right. Well, terrorism is not a new phenomenon. It's been around, and actually the most effective way is generally to infiltrate the organization. I don't know if you remember, there was a book by G.K. Chesterton,
yes.
The Man Who Was Thursday.
Yes.
And they were all the police agents at the head of the annex.
Yeah,
And this is how the British have foiled this attack, because they actually infiltrated it.
The IRA.
Yes, yes.
And they also did it by political dialogue, too. I mean, that happened to be it puts the United States and George Mitchell, not what they participated. I mean, they came to some kind of political dialogue.
No, I mean, there are many things wrong with this concept of war on terror. One of them is that it only refers to military means, whereas it lumps together all the various political manifestations that use terrorism as a means of achieving their goal, and they are different. So you can't really deal with them in abstraction. You have to deal with them individually. Al Qaeda is one thing. Hamas, Hezbollah.
They're all different with different objectives, and they participate or don't participate in the political process to one level or another. But let's just take Al Qaeda and then go to different ones, because I don't want to get hung up on war on terror, although that is in fact used so much that if you think in those terms, you can have some of the manifestations you talk about. But just in terms of Al Qaeda, you can't. How do you negotiate with them? Where is their political settlement?
You cannot negotiate. You cannot negotiate with Al Qaeda. You've got to catch them.
Exactly.
There's no question about that. But you also have to undermine the support. Now, if we had just attacked Afghanistan, where bin Laden lived, that was his address, and he had his training camps. And if we had followed up with nation building in Afghanistan, which was at that time considered a dirty word by President Bush. But if we had just done that, and we could have done a very good job of it, because we were, in fact, welcomed as liberators.
Now, we did try to do that in Afghanistan.
Well,
obviously, we got distracted and went to Iraq. But
we didn't.
Karzai was an effort at nation building, was it not?
Yes.
They had a conference in Bonn. They let Karzai emerge as a popular.
Yes. No, and actually, I take pride in actually having sponsored the organization that prepared that.
Exactly.
And if we had followed through, we could have really brought about big improvement in Afghanistan, and there would be nowhere for bin Laden to hide today. So he would not be around had we pursued the nation building in Afghanistan.
Take Hamas.
Well, Hamas is a different story. I mean, basically, the main source of terrorism, in my opinion, is occupation and humiliation. If you look at Hamas was because of occupation of the West Bank. Hezbollah was brought into existence by occupation of southern Lebanon.
It came into existence after Lebanon.
Yeah, and the Sunni insurrection was created by our occupation of Iraq. The Mahdi army was. And you could almost argue that Al-Qaeda, I mean, I wouldn't want to go that far, but Al-Qaeda turned against the United States because the United States stationed troops in Saudi Arabia. So then on top of it, if the way you pursue occupation is through humiliation, and this is one thing that really boggles my mind. How could we have thought of using those techniques which are deliberately were designed to humiliate the people we caught and put into Abu Ghraib and other camps? That turned them potentially into terrorists or insurrectionists. I mean, because 80% of them were innocent, so we had to let them out, and they were not terrorists when they were put in there, but they came out of that, and they then became supporters, or their brothers and their sons became supporters of the insurrection.
Look at Israel's point, though. Tell me where Hamas doesn't even want to recognize, so far, the right of Israel to exist.
Yes. Well,
nor does Hezbollah. These are two people who wish nor does President Ahmadinejad. comes from a state, not a political organization or not a terrorist organization, don't want to recognize Israel's right to exist. Now, whatever problems and why they have that point of view, whether it's because of occupation, whether it's because, and some say they never accepted the idea of the creation of an Israeli state, they don't want to negotiate. They don't want to accept Israel's right to exist.
That's not entirely true, because Hamas, the political leadership of Hamas was elected by the Palestinian people. They owe a certain allegiance to the Palestinian people. They have a responsibility for their welfare. And that's different from the ideologues that were the founders of Hamas and who are basically based in Damascus.
Okay, but I know about the one who is based in Damascus, who is the most extreme of them all, and is not part of the government there.
Right.
But I haven't heard any Hamas leader who has power in Gaza talk about how he wants to recognize and negotiate with Israel for the creation of a Palestinian state.
Yeah.
I have not heard one say that. And if they have been, tell me.
No. However, I think that has to come as a result of the negotiations, not as a precondition of negotiations. Yeah. So you get somewhat mixed messages out of Hamas. They are talking about indefinite truce, temporary recognition, and all that. Now, at the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy got two messages.
He took the first one.
He took the conciliatory message. And you build on that. And I think it would have been very wise of Israel to try to come to terms with the political arm and to try to drive a wedge between the practical people dealing with practical problems in Palestine and the ideologues in Damascus.
We've had 1,000 discussions about Iraq on this show at this table, as you know.
Yes.
And then you participated in some of them, and all the people writing the books, and Donald Rumsfeld said where you are, and a whole lot of other people have talked about that. I mean, clearly the repercussions from that war, we learn more and more. We just had an intelligence report suggested some of the things that you are saying, which is having to do with the creation of more terrorists and all that. Let me move from Iraq, because it's clear how strongly you feel about that. You tried to get involved in the political process because you felt so strongly about the policies of George Bush. You gave lots of money. You can tell me how much you gave in the end. I mean, I know that at least figures around
$27.5 million.
$27.5 million. Right? Have you soured? Have you given up on the idea of George Soros being able to be involved in the electoral process in some way to change regime?
No. 2004 was a special situation because I felt very, very strongly that if we could possibly remove President Bush from the White House, the future of the world would greatly benefit. And all the various causes that I'm involved with, this would do them a lot of good. So it was something that I felt one has to try. And in retrospect, just imagine if we had a change, we wouldn't be in the really dismal position that we currently find ourselves. Because people, I think, don't realize how much power and influence we have lost in how short a time, and how really dismal the direction in Iraq is, that every day you see the situation deteriorating. So this could have been avoided with a different leadership. So that was worth, staking a lot. And I said if I could, assure success, I would give my entire fortune for it.
You would have?
I would have.
You thought that if I, whatever it is now, 5 or whatever, it's 7 billion, whatever it is.
I surrender if you spend all your fortune. I would.
You would have done it.
I would have done it.
You would have gladly given away 90% of your fortune
in
a minute.
100%, because I think it would have made a tremendous contribution to mankind. I really feel that we set the agenda for the world, and President Bush has set the wrong agenda, and the world is going in a very bad direction.
In the history of the world, there have been regimes that have had good foreign policy and disastrous foreign policy. Then there are changes in regimes. Some brought about from outside, some brought about from inside, from revolution, from just simply at the ballot box. Suppose there is a change in 2008. How long do you think it will take the United States, which the United States values haven't really changed?
Well,
I want to argue that if you believe that. The United States, the American values have not changed. American people haven't changed.
We have betrayed the values that we...
That's one thing, but that's a political leadership you're talking about, not the people here, not the people...
I'm afraid that there is something wrong with the followership. This is not just the leadership's fault.
So you think we've changed?
I think something has gone wrong in America. I don't think that we care so much about being lied to. We accept it. We expect it from politicians, and we get it. We get it from both sides, actually.
Yeah, right.
It's only a matter of degree.
Right.
So something has actually gone wrong. We need to recapture what America used to stand for. It's no longer there, I think. I mean, it's still there, but it's really crumbling. If you look at the...
but just tell me one thing is crumbling. I mean, tell me one thing you think is crumbling about us, other than maybe because of an acceptance of a history of confidence and credibility of a president, and that may have been eroded. But we had in our history, without comparing the level of it, we had a president who lied to us before. We had Richard Nixon had to leave office.
Yes.
So, and then that was followed, as you know.
Yes. Well, take just one thing, which is the act, the new act establishing military tribunals.
Right.
I think that's
the new Senate bill.
Well, it's just being. Right. I think it's now an act.
Right.
Or it will be an act.
Right.
It will be signed in a day.
I'm not sure exactly where they are in the legislative process either, but I know the essence of the bill.
I think it's a shame on us to have actually codified violations of our Constitution and removed access to the courts for people who are accused of being enemy combatants, because not all of them are. I mean, some of them are, but not all of them.
You mean the people held at Guantanamo Bay and
yes,
and in CIA prisons anywhere?
And now they don't have access to courts, so they can be held indefinitely. That's really a violation of our principle.
Okay, but let's make that point. If in fact there was a new administration who perhaps didn't support the war, you know, I mean, most of the people who aspire to be the Democratic nominee, would do something different. You know, the question of when they would ask America to come, the troops to come home, we don't know, and they have different timetables over how they measure the impact of America.
But I think we need to change our role in the world more radically than currently contemplated.
What's a radical change in your judgment?
I think we have to repudiate the war on terror. We have to defend ourselves against terrorists. We have to protect ourselves, but we mustn't make it the be-all and end-all of our policies.
So, in other words, it covers everything. In other words, it seems to me it's more important than
anything else. Now, it has made us do many things that are wrong and counterproductive and violate our principles. And it has also stopped us from doing the things we ought to be doing as leaders of the world.
The peaceful rise of China and all of that. Is that what you're talking about? Or global health or what?
I'm talking about, take global warming, which now is really becoming clear, that it's a clear and present threat, that we are very late in dealing with it, and we may actually miss the boat. And nothing is being done. We ought to be leading the world instead of being the brake, the cog in the machine in dealing with it, which is currently the case. So I believe that as leaders of the world, we have a responsibility, a unique responsibility, to be concerned with the problems. In addition to our self-interest, the narrow mind, we also have to be concerned with the interests of humanity, and lead the world in dealing with them in a cooperative fashion, because those problems cannot be dealt by us dictating to the world.
I mean, when you say that, we ought to be leaving. I mean, I agree with you too. And in fact, in particular, Katrina was not a very attractive moment in our public life as well. But in terms of how America responded to the tsunami, how America responded to an earthquake in Iran, they went to and said, I had people, Nick Burns on this show a couple nights ago, said they went and said, we want to offer you help, and we want to do the right thing as a country now. And private citizens like you and Bill Gates and lots of other people responded, both to Katrina and to the tsunami and to Pakistan's issue. I mean, Sandy Wall, a bunch of people went over there. I mean, that says something to me about the soul of America.
There are an awful lot of decent people, actually, an awful lot of decent people among the religious fundamentalists who seem to be on the other side.
But on global warming, there's even division within that group on global warming.
Yes. So that's what I'm saying. And I know some of them, and I've been working with some of them on some of these issues.
You mean like Rick Warren, people like that, or?
Well, on HIV/AIDS and
Rick
so on.
Warren's been up there. He was in Toronto. Were you in Toronto or not?
No, I wasn't.
All right. But go ahead. I mean, because I want to make sure that I understand what you believe.
No, so you really need to deal with certain issues. So we are very decent people. We mean well, but as a nation, we have to lead the other nations in dealing with those things. We need to cooperate with them. And the idea of international cooperation is unmanly. This is how it's portrayed, and this is how it's viewed by at least half or very close to half the other. And that is where I think we need to change our view of the world. And I say, accept this unique responsibility.
But I don't want you to lose confidence in America, but let me just say, you are in favor of seeing, you sound like Jacques Chirac, you are in favor of seeing Europe as a counterbalance to the United States, are you not?
I would like to see
a strong Europe.
I would like to see a stronger Europe, a more united Europe, because the Europeans, in principle, have this idea of international cooperation. I mean, they have formed this union.
Except when they vote for the Constitution, they turn it down.
Well, because they are also in crisis. Right. I mean, the European Union is in its own crisis, which is parallel to ours. And I wish they would overcome it because the world needs Europe now. I'm a great believer in America, and I think America has a very important role to play as a leader of humanity, of the...
Are you any more... and I just take them because they're moving so fast. Are you any more respectful of China and attitudes it takes in terms of the world and the bargains it makes and the deals it makes simply to guarantee an energy supply?
I have great admiration for China's rise.
So do I.
It's a very dynamic, it's the main beneficiary of globalization. And it's very dynamic. And with this kind of growth and rising prosperity, there's a sort of liberation of energies. So if you talk to Chinese people, it's really very exciting society.
But there is a dramatic difference in the human rights record there than it is here, and even in terms of
No, but unfortunately, in the last few years, they are also going in the wrong direction because they're tightening up. They're nervous about color revolutions, and also they're following our lead. We set the agenda, and we basically set a nationalist agenda. We want to do what we think is right, and we don't want to listen to anybody else. And so they want to be strong.
Although I think that's changing a bit because they learned the hard lesson, because you were right, and they had that attitude, and they learned the lesson.
Yeah, but China is also, and it also, because of the decline in our power, they have become too powerful too soon for their own good. Mm-hmm. They have a very good doctrine of harmonious development, exactly, which would allow them to get rich without getting into conflicts. But they are actually thrown into the political scene. And also because of the energy crisis, they are now running after resources, and they actually, the spoilers. I'm very much involved in dealing with the resource curse. Right. This is countries that are rich in natural resources and have very bad governments, and the people are poor because the money doesn't reach them. And the Chinese are now dealing with rogue regimes like Angola, Sudan,
Venezuela,
and everywhere, Nigeria, and so on. So they are actually becoming spoilers in the world and supporters of rogue regimes like Mugabe. Now we need international cooperation to deal with the tyrants of the world. And that's one of the issues on which we need to cooperate. And there are many tyrants like Saddam. And the way we went about getting rid of Saddam has made it much more difficult to deal with people like Mugabe.
No, I understand. Clearly, it's affected us, and it affected us not only...
It affected China. It has affected their policies. In other words, the youth of China in 1989, they had the Statue of Liberty as their motive. Not anymore. You see, they are not motivated by a concept of open society or so on. They want power because they see us misusing power.
You spent a lot of money in Russia, for example. What's your assessment of where Russia is today? Leave the United States for a while.
Look, I hate to be that pessimistic, but unfortunately Russia also moved in the wrong direction.
So China moved in the wrong direction?
Well, China is still, look, China is not it's very open. There are signs of, tightening up on civil liberties, on very closer control on media, information. Right. Unfortunately, it's all comes from the agenda that we have set for this war on terror and use of power.
In other words, China would not be the way it was if U.S. wasn't the way it is? Is that what you're saying?
I am saying that, yes. Yes. That's what I'm saying. You see, because they were moving...
I think they were so much more shaped by, the desire to... I agree with you. China wants to primarily emphasize economic growth. It can deal with its power later on, whatever implications and whatever aspirations it has within its region and within the world. It's primarily dedicated to that. But the things that affect their attitude have to do with the nature of the power they have and their desire to stay in power and to maintain a stable political situation when they've got lots of conflicts that are built in.
Yes.
Rural, urban, etc.
Yes, but they were moving towards political opening. And now there's a political closing.
But it's not because of us, is it? I think it's because of...
No, I argue in the book, actually.
I know you do, and I'm arguing... you didn't get it right here either.
Well, that's right. I may be wrong. I don't say that, we are determining their actions, but we are influencing it. And we are pushing for democracy. It's not the way to to go about it.
No.
I was very much involved in some of the areas where the color, in some of the countries where color revolutions occurred.
Right.
And I can tell you that the Chinese leadership is absolutely terrified of color revolutions.
Yes.
It's one of the things that has made them
like
so
the Orange
nervous.
Revolution, et cetera.
Yes.
You raised a point about your own mortality.
Yeah.
You know, it is wisdom that comes late, if ever, to most people, but to sort of look back and say, to look forward and say, you know, I can see somewhere in the future, sooner rather than later, where I might die. You know, if you think about that and then come back to where you are today, what is the leading passion you have to do between now and that date?
Basically, I'm sort of passionate about understanding reality, understanding my place in the world, my relationship, my ability to understand the world, and the recognition that perfect understanding is not, perfect knowledge is not attainable. And I think that we need to adjust our thinking, because, you know, the Enlightenment, which has been what I call a fertile fallacy, was based on the belief that we can, in fact, gain knowledge and base our decisions on that knowledge and behave rationally. And we now have to come to terms with a world where that is not possible, because we now had 200 years of enlightenment, and you can see the turmoil and the trouble we are in. Our power over nature has increased, sort of cumulative, but our ability to govern ourselves is not, because of this what I call reflexivity and fallibility.
Right,
and
exactly.
It's what I'm trying to explain in my book. It's sort of a summing up of my philosophical view, and we need to, I think, learn to live with the inherent uncertainty that is created by our inability to gain knowledge. So we need to learn to live with that, accept it, and not deny it. And when you look at it, what is happening today is basically a denial of inopportune and unpleasant truths. You have it in global warming.
Sure.
You have it in the fear of death. You know, we don't accept death. We find it too horrifying, so we kind of in denial of death. And actually, that's what the terrorists hit upon when they attacked.
You know, as someone have said, that they, you know, accept death and are willing to take death, and
yeah, that's the one thing
and
where
believe
they
that death leads them to a place that is better than they are.
Yeah. So I think that is really the challenge. Can we live with our own fallibility?
The book is called The Age of Fallibility, Consequences of the War on Terror by George Soros. Thank you for coming.
It's
great to have you here. Pleasure.